Jack, you home?
And what I'm trying to say again to you, Alex, and to our people, is we're wasting trillions of dollars on generals who were involved in 9/11. Mattis went out there in Iraq and he did whatever he did, which isn't all that impressive to me, but he garnered his own reputation on the basis of that. These boys are not modest, these generals, because they like to self-inflate. Same thing with McMaster. He turned out to be a disappointment, but again, he inflated his own accomplishments. 9/11 was an inside job. There was no requirement to go to Iraq. There was no requirement to go to Afghanistan. So why do I berate the generals? Because they're conspiratorial. This is collusive. They should know better to eventually stand up and say, no, we were taken advantage of, or we wanted to take advantage of one way or the other. And they should have said, no, no more wars, we're pulling back. And they should have had the guts or the manlyhood or their position to say, no, we're not going to fight a war that makes no sense, and all we're providing is cannon fodder.
Trump, for 6 years, he was tweeting out, Ron Paul was right, we got to get out, we got to come back, we got to rebuild America, this is a war that we're not going to win. And then all of a sudden, these generals take him to Camp David, the day that Bannon leaves, they take him to Camp David, and we hear the next day, General Mattis says, well, coming in, he had a very different idea, but he's changed now. We're going to give him the weekend to think about how he's going to sell this to the American people. I was like, oh, this is going to be really bad. And it was really bad, wasn't it?
It was terrible. Mattis, number one, wants to portray. You see, each one of these generals are really what I call the prima donna that eventually want to get their books and their movies done. Contrary to Mad Dog, whatever his name he wants to, self-describe. He's not that intellectually strong. I've had to read his articles, but he's always had two co-writers with him because he's not very literate when it comes to writing an article or his presentation. He goes to the Hoover Institute. Then he sits on the boards and he makes $10 to $20 million, although he corrected his Wikipedia to put $5 million. I have never seen anything in his history that shows he has the capacity to create strategy, to begin a war, to implement a war, or to finish a war in the same way that Marshall did. George Marshall, who never wrote anything about himself. And what does Mad Dog Mattis do? He runs to the television show so they can be a show about him. Then he creates the persona that he's Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was a brilliant general, was a brilliant thinker. Mattis is an idiot, is a terrible general, and has no idea what he's talking about. When he was a major, he was recruiting Marines in Oregon. Now, give me a break. All of these generals were peacetime generals. So what's happening?
It's a massive bureaucracy, isn't it? And one of the things that you said yesterday.
That's exactly it, David.
That's terrible.
Look, let me just put it in simple words. We don't need wars. Trump came in. We said no more wars, no more Afghanistan, no more Iraq. That was it. And his initial instinct was correct. I don't want to go in Afghanistan. Then Mad Hog Mattis, and I give credit to Conley.
Mad Hog, I like that. Is that his name?
It's a man named Conley from Boston, South Boston, who did a brilliant. It was a man named Conley who lives in Maine. I give him credit, called Mad Hog, because he couldn't wait to get out of the military and then run to General Dynamics and then run to Theranos, which was this incredibly ridiculous company that was doing bloodstains, and it was bankrupt. And it shows you how stupid really Mattis is and capable of really living a life on his own. And he had the great insight one day to say, oh, I remained in the military because I didn't want to have a midlife crisis. Are you kidding? This guy is a disaster. He is a self-promoter, a self-aggrandizer, and when you read his articles, they're childish, they're stupid.
That's what I thought. It's like he goes, I know philosophy. I'm really smart. I'm a genius. It's like I'm a shaman, and like it is the most. It sounds like a 5-year-old wrote it.
Correct. And he comes out of the Hoover Institute. Meanwhile, he hasn't done anything creative. He can't write. He's not articulate, and he has no strategy. So other than that, we're doing fine, America. Thank you, Mrs. Lincoln. We had a wonderful time at the, the theater. We're in a disaster mode. Trump should have gone with his instinct and said, get out. We don't need it. McMaster's a disaster. Clapper, who should have been indicted, convicted, and gone to prison for lying in front of Congress. Understand your humor. None of them will understand it. But they take themselves so seriously that they are really slimy parasites of our country. And what we have is a parasitic institution now. 80% of the generals between 2004 and 2011 left their six-figure pensions and went on to get more than 6 and 7 figures from General Dynamics, SAIC, L3, blah, 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 all the other industrial complex. What I expect. The key element here isn't even about Trump. It's about this machinery, this war machinery that keeps on pushing through not only the Clintons, the Obamas, the Bushes, now even Trump, who came in to say, we're going to clean this all out, and suddenly they sequestered him. Now, I'm going to blame part of this on myself, because I encourage some of my people to have military discipline in their command and control.
I've got the plans for next Halloween. I need to go over them with you so we can get started. Jack, please, I'm only an elected official here. I can't make decisions by myself. Jack, answer me. He's not home. Where is he?
He hasn't been home all night.
I think it's important for the President of the United States to understand the legitimacy and seriousness with which General John Kelly has taken his position of Chief of Staff. This is not something he wanted to receive in order to self-aggrandize or to benefit anything from. He's doing this because he's serving the country. That means he's serving me, he's serving you, and he's serving the entire republic. Mr. President, I would like you to understand one thing, that it's very nice for you to be able to work on impulse and your own primary feelings, but it's also equally important for you to understand that we have to have a well-controlled White House where there's a command and control system in place. If some of your friends are complaining, like Roger Stone, then so be it. The real issue here isn't about Roger Stone, it isn't about me, and it isn't about any other civilian. It's literally about the Republic. The reason why General John Kelly was placed there wasn't simply because General Mattis wanted him there and General McMaster. It was the collective will of those of us who've served in the government in different areas and in different forms that insisted that we have a general who could run and manage a White House that had been chaotic. Now, Mr. President, it's your desire to maintain an effective regime. To do so, you're going to need a General Kelly, and you will need a General Mattis to run a Defense Department, as well as many other generals who will command many of our troops overseas and will hopefully develop a strategy that will effectively pull us out of many areas of conflict.
Splendid idea. This was some fun. I fully endorse. Let's try the fun.